Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, no gimmicks guy, and I'm very pleased to welcome back for another interview. I've had the privilege of interviewing William several times on my former channel. With respect to the renowned research, writing, and filmmaking, not to mention podcasting, that he does on a variety of topics. But today we're going to talk about one of his books in conjunction with a phenomenon that we're seeing growing globally. But he published this book in 2021, and it really was, as you'll see, in many ways ahead of the curve. And I'm talking about Global Death Cult, the Order of Nine Angles, Atomwaffen, and the Slaughter of the Innocents. And I'm pleased again to welcome William Ramsey. Thank you for joining me again today, William.
Jack, great to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
I think it's germane to start off with asking, how did this phenomenon first come to your attention, and what inspired you, again, 4+ years ago now, to write the book that you did on the Order of Nine Angles and related groups at that time, Atomwaffen?
Great question. It's a long answer. Most of my career, at least as a writer and researcher, was kind of interested in researching the occult. So I covered Crowley, West Memphis 3, this phenomenon known as the SF smiley face killers, which is young men disappearing at night to be later found in water, which is still happening. And it was during that research into this phenomenon, the SFK phenomenon, is that somebody came to me and said, hey, have you ever heard of this group called the Order of Nine Angles? And I was not aware at all. Somebody had kind of reached out to me a little bit, maybe on social media, but I did not do any research. So I did 3 shows with a guy by the name of Igor Sarsky, the fellow Canadian, actually, as you. And so those kind of, the ideology of the O9A kind of like hit me in the center of my brain. Like, what is this? Is this tied to the smiley face killers? I don't have a lot of proof of that, but there is some symbolic proof, believe it or not, on the smiley face usage between smiley face killers and the Order of Nine Angles. But I wanted to kind of research. So then I researched. I noticed it was kind of not really being talked about at the time, but I was aware of this kind of farthest right neo-Nazi movement, Atomwaffen, and the Order of Nine Angles books being associated. And then I started seeing things in the news of deaths. And 2 people come to mind. One is Ethan Meltzer, and then another is Willem von Nudegem, who killed somebody in Toronto, Canada. And they both had O9A connections. So it led me down the kind of research path, and I basically just wanted to devour as much of the material as I could online and all that. And that's what led to Global Death Cult being published in 2021.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain for those that may not be initiated what the Order of Nine Angles is and how it evolved from a rather small British neo-Nazi group to this global sort of entity?
Yeah, I mean, it really started in the UK, and the kind of founding ideologist or ideologue was a guy by the name of David Myatt, who used different kind of pseudonyms as well. And he was like a very smart neo-Nazi. He was part of the kind of far-right movement in the UK. I think it was called National Action or something like that, was kind of the political party. They never got any public real traction. So maybe 10% of the vote, 15% of the vote. And I think so he was kind of a frustrated neo-Nazi, and he was interested in the occult on the side. And so he kind of had the time and energy to kind of go through all the old occult traditions, including Crowley and all these guys, Aquino, LaVey, and kind of craft his own thing. He started off very small. This is pre-internet. So he would write 3-page missives, very small tracts, but then they started compiling them all together. And he would actually send those out from his P.O. box in like little plastic binders, like back, very old school, like pre-internet. And so it had like a real underground traction. So people who were interested in underground information at that time maybe could get these documents. But then the internet took hold in the 90s, and it's just slowly started to grow, and it became kind of a, and to this point in 2025, it's clearly a worldwide movement. It has little cells or centers all over the world in different countries. The terminology they use in the Order of Nine Angle is a nexion, which is kind of a meant to be both a causal and a causal group, or we could say temporal or spiritual. But these like groups are all over, and you can see them online. So they have them in a lot of most major cities actually have a connection to some kind of Order of Nine Angles, and that's something that I learned. So then it spread out, and then the ideology. The way that he crafted his thing was not, well, at least publicly, not to have kind of a top-down, rigid hierarchical system, but kind of get his ideas out there. And it's almost like Scientology or a cult, where it has its own terminology and its own kind of language and weird terms that you may not know, but or nobody would know unless you read it. Like I didn't know it either. But it actually, it's interesting to think that he started this all the way in probably the 80s or late 70s, started writing stuff, and it led all the way up to 2025. You have a boy, a young guy, 18, 19, kills his parents and is online talking to the Order of Nine Angle people and using very specific terms. His name was Nikita Kasap. He was arrested, but he was doing really dark stuff. And you see that personality change that happens to these young men happened at Atomwaffen. So basically, that ideology. One of the things, like when I first started researching the O9A, is this just a bunch of LARPers? Are these guys playing around, or are these ideas actually having practical, real world consequences and application by people? And the answer to me is the latter. It really was. There really are people who, for one reason or another, take to this specific ideology and try to institute it. So, and it's like that's kind of like the long answer.
No, that's excellent. One of the threads that be it the O9A, or we're going to talk about 764, and the multitude of splinters from them. They seem to have specializations in certain areas, but they seem to all subscribe to this philosophy, or I guess you want to call it a theory of accelerationism, which we're seeing actually in some real concrete examples as we tape this. Can you talk about what that exactly means for across the spectrum? For, there's probably differences, but the core meaning of that philosophy.
Yes. So the accelerate is to accelerate the end of whatever culture or civilization you're in so they can replace it. One of the central ideologies of the O9A is a political application, much like Nazism, is that it's not just some kind of cultural thing, but to actually create a new galactic empire. Like they have a space opera view, kind of like Scientology, or even Mormonism is kind of a space opera in some ways. There's like a planet you go to, but this is, you're going to create a new species, Homo galacticus, and in 400 years we're going to get out. So we have to get rid of everything here so we can attain that. It's very ambitious. Whether it'll actually be plausible or possible is really another question, but this is their view of acceleration. There are other just right-wingers who believe in this philosophy, so it's not specific to O9A. But the idea, they have like this nihilistic, post-apocalyptic worldview. And so that's kind of what they're trying to bring in. So they're going to bring that in, and they're going to be the ones who are ruthlessly going to create a new civilization.
So basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but the common thread would be, in order to bring on whatever the next step would be, you have to, you quote Nietzsche, completely destroy society, civilization as we see it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they view this as almost like they're a new seed race or something like that. So it does have a racial aspect. The word that they used in the O9A was, they called people mundanes or homo horribilis or something like, and it shows their attitude is that they're special. They're cut apart from normal human beings. and so they're going to become something else. So they have a very interest. I mean, and they're only looking for small amounts of people. They're not looking for, great public acclaim or anything, which is also very interesting. But it's to try to find somebody else that will join them and work with them to kind of attain their ends. But yeah, they have this. It's almost like what I tell people about. It's almost like the attitude of Harry Potter towards the Muggles. If you've read Harry Potter, the magical people are all special, and then the public is just a bunch of unmagical, goofs like his parents and his brothers and sisters or whatever it is.
Isn't that kind of interesting? Well, interesting meaning disturbing that central premise is being marketed in varying ways depending on how deep you peel the onion in terms of transhumanism and folks like Elon Musk. The basic premise is we're useless eaters, and the next step will be better, be it a cyborg or a celestial being or whatnot. I found that link to be very interesting that not a lot of people make.
No, I'm glad you made it, because it is true and it is interesting. He recently posted on social media, you guys are some other civilization. We have the rockets. And it does overlap ideologically with the O9A. Now, there is an O9A tie between Musk and the O9A. And that is that one of his baby mamas or ex-wives, a woman named Grimes, who is alternate music. I think she's from Canada too, actually. But I think she's had 3 of his kids. One is named X4775 or something. She's kind of multi-talented. I would call her a electronic artist or something, an electronic music artist. She's worked with a group called Bring Me the Horizon, who is more popular in the UK. They haven't really made it to the States. And they also did stuff with Ed Sheeran, which is I've done a whole show on this. But the connection is there. Bring Me the Horizon is an occult influenced order. They're influenced by Crowley. They have the unicursal hexagram in some of their band promotions. But the Horizon in the O9A ideology, you're out all night. You're presencing evil spirits. And you do it at night. So that's the thing. So you're supposed to go out at sundown and get home by sunup. So Bring Me the Horizon is they're out late at night. And this comes in. They did this whole transhumanism kind of like a techno occult song. I can't remember it offhand, with Grimes. So she knows them. To be with those people, there's no doubt about that. And Musk is here in LA, like going to court, but with her about what do you call it, payola, or what, how much he's going to pay for child support, custody issues. So it's not, people think like this once they start studying it, if they do, it really is much more, much like Crowley. Because it's sub rosa and a lot of it's initiatory and secretive, they don't see it. But if you kind of know the ideology, you're like, okay, I know these terms. Much like Nikita Kazap, you could just say Nikita Kazap was a lone guy, but he thought he was part of a global occult network, that they were going to help him. He was part of 10 different people who were going to commit these crimes and all end up in the Ukraine under different, pseudonyms and survive. And it was all baloney. But the tie to Musk, it's a much longer story, because these guys, they call it the Dark Enlightenment. There's other people who've done shows on it recently, because it's connected to Dark MAGA, and you've seen Musk with that Dark MAGA hat, and it's kind of this Dark Enlightenment, this ideology of certain philosophers, one of whom his name is Nick Land, Land, who is Order of Nine Angle associated. So they're absorbing this kind of like dark view, and there's a bunch of other different characters in there, but it's not, their worldview is very closer to the O9A, where a techno elite will rule over the slaves, almost like something from an H.G. Wells novel or something like that, like The Time Machine or something like that, the Morgoth and the Eloi. And it's not a positive view. It's not like everybody's traipsing through the daisies and everybody has enough to eat. It's more like a specialized elite rules over the herd. or the
Yes.
mundanes, or the muggles, whatever you want to see it. But it's also it's almost that satanic Luciferian view that we're special, you're not, we're better than you, and this is the way it's going to play out.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. If you know that philosophy, you can recognize it in other applications. In your book, you explore the concept of a global satanic fascist military nexus. Uh, I know in the past you've talked about Aquino and some others, but what in more recent years did you uncover to suggest that they were infiltrating institutions like the military and the police?
That was a central thing. So within my book, I think it's chapter 4, I go in detail, kind of lay out the different concepts, some that are very unique and specific to the O9A. One of them is called an insight role. And the whole idea is to create insight by playing a role in whatever organization. So even you could even infiltrate another occult order being O9A. But one of the main things is to infiltrate the military or intel. And the ones that have been caught infiltrating the military. And there was a real problem in the United States. I think there's much more so in the 80s and the 90s of guys trying to go get training who were white supremacists or like farthest right wingers, like actual ones, not somebody on the left complaining and calling people fascists. There's a fascist element to this, but I mean, some of these terms are kind of outdated and they're clumsy, clunky, but they would go in. And so a lot of these guys who've been caught have, and one of the main guys, the guy who started Atomwaffen, he actually tried, his name was Brandon Clint Russell, and he got his ideas going back to the UK. So he had gone to the UK and he was on all these fascist websites. So the gestation, the genesis of Atomwaffen took place with global travel and communications. And he joined the National Guard. So he was going on weekends, and I'm not totally familiar with how the National Guard works, but you're not fully invested 40 hours a week. You spend a month, like a weekend a month. But he was getting training through that. And there was a bunch of other guys. And when you hear their chatter, they're chatting about, we got to get some training or get in the military or the army. They had that infamous kind of thing that went down in Charlottesville there, which is the Unite the Right, I think is what they call it, which had a lot of Order of Nine Angles guys, a lot of Atomwaffen guys. And when you looked at them, a lot of those guys had military training.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the infiltration. Those what's been caught. Like, I don't know. People ask me, like, what famous person is involved? I always say Ed Sheeran because I know his stuff from Bad Habits. The video Bad Habits is basically a symbolic display of O9A ideology. But there could be other politicians and other famous people or famous adjacent people who are believing the O9A or were right wingers. So it's I think, and that one of the interesting thing bringing up all this kind of techno occult stuff in Elon is I think it might be attractive in this new age with its kind of technologically more sophisticated world that people would be attracted to the O9A because of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. In your research, you've highlighted a connection between O9A and brutal crimes in U.S., Canada, and beyond. What out of those shocked you the most?
Well, like I mentioned, Meltzer tried to set up his military unit. He was playing an insight role. One of the things that gave him away as an O9A member is he literally took a picture of the skull mask with a knife and a picture of the sinister tradition that had the O9 angles on it. So he kind of couldn't get away. He thought he was communicating with O9A people online, but he was going to set up his unit for a terrorist act. And he really cold-blooded. It never happened, and I think that luckily he wasn't so operationally astute, is maybe a way to put it, so it never passed. But that was something. The other one is the one I mentioned earlier, is William von Nudegem, who's, I believe, his Order of Nine Angles altar is still online, so you could see it, so you could get away. He was doing the chants. Myatt spent time as a Christian monk, so he knew these chants. He was anti-Christian, but that was his insight role. It's like it was an insight role on how to do this. So you could hear with Willem von Nudegem do his kind of chanting and the triangles and all the set pieces that are specific to the O9A. But he ran, I mean, getting back to the central ideology of the O9A, that's a septenary way. So Myatt was very Anglo-Saxon. He didn't like Jews. He called them Nazarenes. So that encompasses Jews and Christians. So he had contempt for both of them. But so he adopted this tree of words. So instead of the Kabbalah, it's the tree of words, septenary way. And there were certain things that you're supposed to do to get to the top level of the septenary way, which is almost kind of like he's telling you you'll be almost like deified, have some kind of eternal life, which is a big sell. But the steps you do, like the second or third step, if I remember, is you go out at night and the sun goes down, and then you sit in a prone position until the horizon rises or the sun comes up. The one after that is to select an opfer, which is a sacrifice. But their version of sacrifice isn't like just some person on an altar. It's just to go out and kill somebody, but to do it randomly and get away with it. And so I think Willem von Nudegem was doing it. He literally went out to some guy who was a front man for a mosque and just randomly went up and slit his throat. Some older guy, 50-year-old man. And the only reason he got caught was he walked into CCTV, which somebody identified him just by the style of his walk or something like that. A week before that, there was a homeless guy who had been stabbed in the same way. William von Nudegem, he was just recently convicted, I think in 2024, but he was never charged with that first death. But it was very close to where the second murder happened. So that's pretty stunning. There was another one that is called Daniel Hussein, and it happened in London, northwest London. And he was online. This is the international quality of this. He was online, and he was talking to something, Become a Living God website, and he made a blood pact to this Lucifuge Rosafal, this so-called chief demon, and he was going to commit a crime and get away with it. And he went into two random women and killed them in a night. They were just picnickers, like just total random event. Hid their bodies. The reason he got caught, he was also on CCTV buying stuff at a supermarket. And they traced him back. They actually kicked this guy who was associated with the Order of Nine Angles. His name is E.A. Quedding. And they kicked him off YouTube and found out that he had been writing for the Order of Nine Angles, which is also very sinister. Like, it's very murky. Like, there's clearly Myatt, but there's also other people involved. But one of the other killings that happened, and this was a recent conviction, the death happened in 2021. But what's odd about it, it's not really an Order of Nine Angle killing, but it has the same ideology, and it's the death of a young man in Oxford by the name of Jorge Carreño. He died in 2021, and he was in downtown Oxford, the city the university city in the UK. He had been drinking all night with friends from his BMW manufacturing job. He just was drunk, and he disappeared. They said on CCTV, somebody came up and talked to him and walked him outside the CCTV. He was found in a pond, basically the size, like a 10 by 10 pond with like nothing noticeable, and dead, supposedly drowned. And so it was a big thing. Like, nobody thought, there was actually kind of a call for who was this guy who was with Jose Carreño, but he was just assumed an accidental death. His family came in from Spain. Real tragedy. What happened later is 2 years later, a transsexual from Austin, Texas, told the police that somebody had confessed to actually murdering him. Now, the police didn't know that he had been murdered. The transsexual said that this person from Oxford, whose transsexual name is man to woman, supposedly, how far along? Still, it gets really graphic. Name of the Scarlet Blake confessed that he lured him and killed him, and he did it. And then he went to the memorial at the site of the death, and like really drank in and got away with it. And what it is, it's also how the ideas behind, at least my ideas behind the smiley face killings and the O9A overlap, because this is a classic smiley face killing MO. Random, found, water death. What's the O9A supposed to do? Random, nighttime, death, and get away with it. So I don't know. And he was very much in this guy, Scarlet Blake. There's pictures of him at BDSM clubs, and he was very much networked in the international transgender community. And it's weird too, because since that time, there's been the Z-Wiz cult or whatever. No, I can't remember, but it's a transgender cult.
Mm-hmm.
And internationally, who's been killing people. They killed somebody in California, New Hampshire, and outside of Philadelphia. So in Pennsylvania. And this guy, Scarlet Blake, was international. He was traveling to the US and Austin, where there's a hot spot of SFK deaths. So you can't make this up. And there's so much more to this guy, Scarlet Blake story. And the police just said, you're busted for this one crime and you're going to jail. And he's in jail for 30 years. But they never seem to want to tie him down to possibly other murders on an international scale. Now, what's the motivation? This is what's disturbing, is that you have a guy who's, taking all these transgender hormones and stuff like that. Why is he doing this? What's his motivation to find some poor, hapless, random guy from Spain who's in the UK and do something horrible like that? Like, what ideology is it? And it doesn't happen at random. Like, why would you think like this? It's some kind of either darker impulse, or he's come across O9A ideas somewhere in some idea, like, I'm going to do this and prove this to my friends, or try to get initiated deeper into this organization. I don't know, but it's always left me that this is like a perfect example of O9A played out and SFK at the same time under just one case. So there's a lot going on. And then people talk to me, it's like, well, you have these cases. What are the other ones out there that nobody's ever thought was a murder? How many of these SFK cases are really I think a lot of them, if not all of them, are murders. But like, what's going on? Why is this happening? And there may have been other things involved in these cases, like actual ethnic racism. Scarlet Blake was an Asian guy, and Carreño's European. He's Spanish, and a lot of they've had a lot of these other cases, like they're white males. So maybe somebody has an animus towards actual white males. That's why they're doing it. They either feel hatred or jealous, or you're a colonizer. This is my way of getting back to you. And there was another case, and this is it's more of an SFK case, O9A. His name was Reynard Sanaga. He was from Indonesia, but he was in Manchester, and he was the UK authorities said he was the most prolific rapist of men in the history of the UK.
Yeah.
And he had like 100 to 150 victims. And he would do the same thing the SFK MO was. He would wait till 2 a.m. He would go out to these bars. He was gay. He would go out to these bars, find drunk people, bring them back to his apartment, drug them with GHB, and rape them and film it. That's how they knew they had evidence. And he got away with it for years. And if you saw him, he was like the most milquetoast, non-threatening person imaginable. It just looked like a 5'8", 5'9", non-muscular dude, but he was on a rampage. And how many of his victims actually died and he threw in water, right? Like, we don't know. We'll never know the full truth. So that's a long answer to your question. There's a lot of strange cases. People need to be aware, and late at night. Men are victims now. And I think these cases have happened in the environment of the rise of the LGBT movement. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Like the rise of the gay rights and all this stuff. When was Stonewall? I don't know, late 80s or something. So there's just getting stranger and stranger out there. But like, there's just so many cases of rapes and deaths and things like that late at night of men now.
Yeah, that's excellent. And in our next scheduled interview, we'll delve into your work on the smiley face killers and all the updates since then, including certain hotspots now. Like, it sounds like Austin, Texas is a very dangerous place to be. But with this philosophy, or I guess central tenet of culling that you spoke of, murdering people, and then this rise of this similar modus operandi of drowning cases and disposing of bodies in water. This seems to be an absolutely coordinated effort. And how crucial was or is the digital age to the explosion in these? And like you've talked about, there's many cases on record, but how many more that haven't been linked? And we'll get into the politics of all that in the next show. But how crucial is the digital age in explaining how so many deaths are all of a sudden utilizing the same methodology, give or take?
It's a great question, because I think that's another environment where these kind of deaths is that this MO has been shared somewhere online on like some kind of underground post board or underground community. I tell people in these other shows I've done, like, go see the documentary Kink, where like it's a BDSM community, but people from all over the world can stream in and watch it. That's how they made money, is they would, pay $50 to watch the next victim who survived, but they were, the torture, like really rough stuff, like very dark. And so I think the growth of the internet is crucial to the growth of the O9A and the growth of this kind of phenomenon, this kind of strange phenomenon of young men being disappeared. And then this whole culling thing, this total contempt for human beings. They would call, in the O9A, they call them homo hubris. So like, oh, they're also arrogant, and that this whole kind of concept of selecting your sacrificial victim and stuff like that. And you kind of see this kind of like, I mean, it's just getting harsher and rougher out there in general. And even the Bible said, like, men's hearts will grow colder. And this is kind of cold-blooded stuff. Like, even the BDSM community is really rough. So I think that the internet's crucial in sharing. And in an odd way, I think the technology is neutral. The technology is good. You and I can share this information and get the word out. And I learned through the O9A through reading things through the internet and things like that. So it could be used for good and bad. But I think that there's so many other stories of like pitch black evil stories of like streaming and abuse. And somebody is like, I had one chapter in my book, my new book on the smiley face killers, like her, and that she was a psychic named Sloan Bella. She says these people are making snuff films with these guys. And that kind of ties into this whole kink thing where people are filming this and memorializing, and they're creepy. And so there's really is a dark underworld. It's real. It's not like speculative at all. And so I think the internet has helped like realize it, but also I think these kind of people with very sinister, diabolical sensibilities are also communicating using this technology. And I did a show on a guy who I really covered in my first documentary in 2017. His name is Peter Christofferson. And it's interesting. He was very very smart. His dad was a professor. He was technologically astute, but he was clearly kind of traveling around and communicating with people. Like, he was networked. They called him the professor and the Uncle Sleazy. And it's kind of like people, I think that he was part of this really dark BDSM gay community. Like, he would travel around and people knew him in New York City, which was a hot spot, and all this other stuff, like really crazy. And a lot of his iconography, and he was an occultist, he admired Crowley, but also a lot of his kind of stuff he did, like, it ties into this kind of really dark stuff. There's one of his artworks. He did a lot. I mean, it's very strange because above board, he did artwork for like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, but for his own stuff, he had this one album cover that had a dead body face down in water in mud. And it's just like, this is what people do when they find these bodies, is like somebody just like that, face down in water, in shallow water too, which is even worse. So most people don't have that kind of evil animus. One of this, I just streamed a thing about this guy, Christopherson, who was networked with all these dark actors, and he was wearing a shirt saying, "I'm evil." He's just acknowledging it. People who aren't like that, they can't understand these thought processes.
Yeah, I think in one of our other interviews, we discussed the mainstream, again, thanks to Crowley and all the individual celebrities that find him to be an inspiring character. The mainstream has gone very enamored with Satanism, and it's right out there in your face. Evil is right out there, and these groups seem to be, or their proliferation seem to be, a natural extension of at least the West embracing such ideas, I guess, or just embracing evil. Evil is cool, like you've said before.
Yeah. It is interesting. So you see this kind of promotion of it too. So it's not just the practice, but the will. And I think it's kind of interesting you mentioned Crowley too, because he wanted to create this new aeon, this new magical order, this worldview. And then these other people who are after Crowley, whether it's Myatt or L. Ron Hubbard, wanted to do the same thing, or Christopherson, they are actively facilitating these dark changes to create this kind of world. Like, so it's not just, this is my own private life and I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to be with my own kind of clique, but it's like I'm promoting. So that's what he's promoting in all of this videos and spirit communication. I mean, like Tainted Love, you still hear that on the radio, this Mark Allman song. Peter Christopherson is right there making those videos and stuff like that. He made videos for Rage Against the Machine, which are still played. Like it's so, and they're all filled with this kind of accelerationist, nihilistic, post-apocalyptic stuff. NWO by Ministry. So like you see these overlaps, and what's interesting too is a lot of occultists, E.A. Koetting, who I mentioned earlier, externally he had his own kind of like little occult group, but he was doing writing for the Temple of Blood, which is Order of Nine Angles stuff. So a lot of these guys are overlapping. One of the outer heads, I have this in the my book, Global Death Cult, was a guy by the name of Ford from Texas who had kind of his own occult order. I think it was called the Order of the Dragon or something like that. But he was also affiliated with this Order of Nine Angles in a very prominent position. Like he was the outer head of the order. So this global network, this global thing, and this global change, the global culture and acceleration, a lot of these guys really do believe in it. It's not just some kind of like LARP. That's what people ask me, like, are these guys just live action role players? And you're like, no, not the leads. Maybe the lesser people who come and go or whatever, but not the heads of these guys. They're very serious.
Yeah, and the argument can be made very seriously mentally ill as well. In recent years, we have seen the growth of a kind of an offshoot. I guess spiritually, that's not the right word, but the same sort of concept that grew into it metastasized into something else. And I would be talking about the 764, who gained national media attention with several high-profile arrests. Some kid started 764. He was 15 or 14. It blew my mind. They in addition to the foundation of O9A, they kind of specialized into child exploitation crimes. Is this an example of the cancer that O9A can create? Because we're seeing branches of, like, for example, this group, heavy duty on child sexual abuse material, exploitation, all manner of horrendous offenses. But it seems to all have that central nihilistic core. Is that correct? And do you see that as a growing problem for the future?
Yeah, I do see it as an offshoot of O9A, and it is a current problem. Like it's getting worse. It could be worse in the future, but like it's really peaked the understanding of this kind of 764. Maybe not so much going back to the O9A, but these kind of grooming gangs and this kind of online abuse has made it to the Department of Homeland Security. Like there are notifications coming out of the FBI about this, and there's a lot more publicized versions and a lot more publicized arrest and wrap-ups. But like some of these cases were very well known. I don't know if you saw the video, it went viral, of a guy, some guy, kid's mom shooting him. His name was Kyle Spitz.
The stepdad?
Yeah. And then the stepdad got killed. Well, it turns out that Kyle was heavily involved in the 764, which, you know, total offshoot. And I forgot what his outcome. I think he went to jail. I think he's in jail. And so that's just one element, but it's really becoming like now schools. Somebody just sent me something this last week about schools warning students and their parents, watch out for online grooming gangs because they're sophisticated, they're young, they're nihilistic, they're accelerate. It's a kind of an element of the acceleration of like destroying the culture, but they go onto innocuous sites like Fortnite or Roblox. So like, why wouldn't you want your kid to be playing these things online? That then they take you off. Hey, why don't you come with me to, I don't know, one of these encrypted chat type things. And then they start, you know, the thing. There was one guy online. His name was Bradley Cadenhead from Texas. He literally abused other people all day. That's what he did all day. He didn't have a job. He would just abuse women all day. He went to jail. But there's like so many other cases that have come up. Like I did a show with BX who's done great documentaries on there, and she's really blown up. She's been on InfoWars, and she's been on Laura Logan, and 2.5 hours. Like there's a lot to talk about, but I did a show with her in 2024, and just case after case after case after case. And it's really changed. Like when I was looking at 09A leading up to 2021, I was looking at more of like a far right ideological thing, but there was a subtext of child abuse. They didn't have these terms. 764, I don't remember seeing even that number before 2021, which is how rapidly these things can metastasize. They didn't even have the term CSAM, I'm almost positive, which is an acronym for Child Sexual Abuse Material. Yeah. So these are all kind of new things, but it's just like just so crazy that it's all just grown up. So yeah, it's a new thing, and it's still happening. And I think they wrapped up. They had just like the 09A, where new organizations and new things grew up and morphed and changed. It's like 764. There's just all kinds of other different names of groups that don't come, like Atomwaffen and all these other numbers and stuff. So like they're clearly reshaping their external publicization to keep themselves safe. But I think it's good that, and there's actually been more documentaries online too, by kind of traditional kind of BBC type things and other things. So it's definitely happening.
Yeah, CBC up here in Canada did a piece on them, which I thought was positive. Do you find it depressing? I know we're about the same vintage. I mean, I think back when I was 14, I wanted to play sports and play Atari and whatnot. And you've got these really young people turning so dark. I'm wondering. I found that to be really out of all of it, and the crimes are horrendous, etc. But I think back in the day, hate groups traditionally were, if you look at White Aryan Resistance or the neo-Nazis, they had older people pulling the strings, and then the young people were the soldiers, etc., etc. But again, to 764, this kid was 14 or 15. What does that say about what the hell is going on in society that a lot of very young minors themselves are engaging in this criminal behavior?
It's a good question. I mean, it's about online culture, probably access to porn too. Like some of these young kids are being exposed to stuff that my generation or our generation never had, and being online. Like, I mean, the real foundational element is these kids, these men, are online for long periods of time. Whatever they're doing, they're going to message boards and getting into darker and darker stuff at a very young age. So that was like one of the things that I saw was very stark and obvious when I was researching 09A and Atomwaffen is like, get these kids off of line for so long. That's the common denominator. So this online culture where older people are allowing people to see this, I think the states have actually made good decisions by keeping, like, you have to have an age, like the state legislatures are saying to access porn, you have to be 18 or older in certain states. So they're exercising their states' rights, which I think is good. But it's just such a different environment to answer your question. Like this new kind of constant data was not something that existed. I'm so old. I remember having to stand up to turn the channels on my TV. So these kids, everything's coming to you on a cell phone, iPad. And I think that they used to protect younger people from being exposed to this stuff. And something happened in our culture where it's like, oh, this is just totally normal. And it's not. It's totally abnormal. And they shouldn't be exposed to that. And so I think movies had an MPA rating, TVs had it. And I think that the internet has to have it. Like, it's been too long, and they should moderate and mediate. And there's so much horrible stuff. Like, even Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg's been in front of Congress. Like, why are you allowed? Like, people who've been abused, their material is on his dumb website. So we're in a new place, and a lot of these people, it's just a horror show. Like, you just can't even imagine what's going on. Like, in the 764, the abuse is horrific. Scarring, filming, blackmail. Like, imagine like a 16-year-old boy blackmailing another girl or whatever with this stuff. Like, and one of these guys was like 30. Forgot what his name was. Richard Densmore. He got arrested. But so parents need to be aware and monitor their kids' online activity, no question. And the government should do it too. Like, people should insist that their local government take control and kick these things off. There's no reason somebody should be on some of these sites, and these sites should be available.
Yeah, 100%. In addition to parental responsibility, some of the earlier cases of 764 and other groups as well, parents and others reported it to the police. And then it seemed that in a couple of situations, it was let go, and there were tragedies as a result, or not followed up. Do you think that law enforcement are slowly starting to get wise to these online groups and the destructivity that they can produce?
I think so. I think the awareness has grown because it's so new. Like I said, 764, I don't remember it existing before 2021. So I think because it's new, they're going to have to catch up. And I think they are. I think people are realizing, like, it's getting out of control. So I think, and a lot of these arrests are examples of that. So I think, and it's international, like the response has been international. But I think the police are catching up to it, and the authorities in general. And they're realizing it's like a very serious problem.
You mentioned BX earlier, who really did a lot of groundbreaking work on 764. She experienced a lot of death threats, targeting her family. They seem to like to go after families. And I know yourself, particularly with the West Memphis 3 and that Eccles, seemed to get a lot of hate and feedback of a negative nature while you're exposing this. Do you have any trepidation when you're delving into these, particularly the current really dark corners of the I know your specialty is the occult, and all of these I think have a link to that. Do you ever fear or consider your safety when you see some of the other examples out there of people that have had some pretty serious death threats against not only themselves but family as well?
Sure, of course. I think the risk is always there. I think you just live in a dangerous world anyway. So, it wasn't my first rodeo, and some of the guys who were researching Atomwaffen, there was a massive swatting campaign, and some of these guys got swatted real bad. I don't want to mention their names, but they were from ProPublica. They went after the guys from Atomwaffen went after the head of the DHS. Like they were very ambitious. So there are risks. There's risks in everything. I got my own death threats from 764, and I don't really even research them as much as she does. But if you want to tell the truth or expose people doing wrong, there's always going to be that risk. So it's just part of the job, I guess. I mean, it's like I said, it's not my first rodeo. Like I taught researching the 09A was a lot easier after I'd gone after West Memphis 3, which is what involved. They would, yeah. So I mean, these are dangerous people. There's really dangerous people out there, and it's important to put the spotlight on them so people go, "Hey, this guy is a wolf. This is not a lamb. These people they believe they like being wolves. They like to be predatory, So it's important to to recognize that so people know what's going on.
I find it can be somewhat of an uphill battle when you. I don't want to use the term normies, but those that really aren't initiated into. For example, when you talk about control of in certain aspects of the internet, folks have an initial visceral reaction. Well, no, this is censorship, and then you have to talk about topics like this to again normies, and they don't really understand. But more importantly, I think they can't fathom or process that this stuff is out there. They live a normal life. They don't maybe encounter this sort of thing, and I find there's almost a willful disregard. Some people I've tried to have discussions with, and they're like, I don't want to talk about that, or that's BS. They disregard it. So I find it's a real uphill battle, not only in terms of the risks that you talk about, but when you're really putting yourself out there in terms of your credibility as not myself, but as a researcher and an author, it's daunting in some ways.
I think so. I think that's kind of the purpose of my book. They're all footnoted. Like a lot of people won't believe this, but like read it. These are actual real facts. This guy was dating a girl. He ended up killing her parents over like the Atomwaffen. So, be careful. Who's your daughter dating? Like, well, why don't you want to know this stuff? Why don't you want to protect yourself and your family? Why don't you want to protect your kids? Because their predators are out there. It's just the way of life. That's why we have jails. That's why we have the criminal justice system. That's why we have criminal laws. So it's kind of silly to think that these people, I think the reality is that the media environment has changed so people can actually proactively read stuff and find out. And then there's passive people who just want to turn their brain off and get semi-hypnotized by TV news. And those are almost two different opposite spectrums of the human experience. So I don't know why people would want to choose to have this kind of narrow. I think even like certain media is the message, just like Marshall McLuhan said. But other people said, if you really want to control somebody, narrow their understanding of the world, and then you can just, have at them, because they don't have any larger frame of context. And those people are the ones who don't want to talk about things like the 09A 764 Crowley or serial killers or things like that. And it actually goes, if you go back to even like the Podesta files, like they say, there's a lot in the Podesta files. There's like stuff about maps and Crowley, Thelema. But there's another really important statement where they said, we've done a good job pacifying the American people. Like they acknowledge that they've created these kind of psycho-civilized Americans. And so these people who are, so whatever term you want to call them, mundanes, muggles, normies, they've been given their own personality. And one of the horrors of their real life is if they ever snap out of it and go, why do I think the way I do? It's because some evil person in the government wants you to think like that. Like none of this stuff happens. So they want you in the Tesseract or on the pasture, like a cow. So I mean, it's that.
The whole red pill phenomenon.
Right. It's all about metaphysics. Yeah. Whatever.
What did you, in the final analysis, I would encourage folks to get this book, get your books, very centralized sources of knowledge on current topics as opposed to having to, click all over the place, similar to the smiley face killer work. But what do you hope that readers take away from that book? And do you see it as eventually contributing to the raising of public awareness of these groups? Is that your centralized goal, so to speak?
I think so. I think it's kind of wake people up, snap people out of it, snap them out of their kind of complacency. Make them aware. I didn't know much about it either. I can't say that I always knew. Most of the subjects of my books are things I didn't know about. So, but I do think they're important to people know about. That's my number one selling book right now is the Global Death Cult book, because it's back in the news so much with CASAP and things like that. So you're kind of like in a newer environment, newer cultural environment. It's much more multifaceted with the internet. And so I hope people be aware, so you get delivered from evil. Like there's evil people out there, actively evil, and don't be naive about it. Like your kids can get caught up. It may not even be a selfish thing, but your family members or something like that, or your daughter, God forbid, would get caught up in this things online and have her life change for the worst forever. Some of these kids have to go get operations to fix the scarring that they did because of this. So I just hope the awareness goes out and get the kids out, even the boys and the teenagers who are doing it, committing the crimes. How did they get to the point where that happened? They're either from a broken home, their parents are not around, they're not doing positive, proactive sports, theater, chess club. Like get them outside. Like this whole online culture is it's almost like a pseudo reality or something. Like they go into a pseudo world, a fictional world, an avataristic avatar world where they can do this stuff. So get them out of that. There's a lot to do outside, and it's a lot more healthy mentally, physically, and spiritually.
Yeah, like touch grass. William, where can the folks find you in terms of your website, your work, and let's not forget your podcast, William Ramsey Investigates? Huge fan. I catch every episode, and you're in the top 0.5 or something like that of all podcasts currently. That's a big accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm in the top probably 15,000, 17,000 podcasts in the world. My books are all on Amazon. You can buy signed copies from my website, William Ramsey Investigates. I post a lot on X. I haven't been censored there yet, so that's good. And then my Patreon, I do have a Patreon that I post a lot of stuff. Like I posted the Christofferson stuff there because it's very, very, very dark, pitch black evil. But I just keep working. The thing is that I've accrued like 15 years of research. And so certain places have been censored. So I have to go back and re-put up all this stuff somewhere. And I've been doing that. So a lot of the stuff on the West Memphis 3 that people may not know about, I already researched it. And it's still salient. It's still meaningful. Depp is still around. Eccles was on Tim Pool, like number one or one of the biggest alternate media places. So these guys are still around, and their ideas are still around. But my podcast, you can just find it on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast.
Well, I want to thank you again for the interview. Certainly always an interesting discussion, and I look forward to our next one, updating your work on the smiley face killers. And man, there's a lot to talk about there. But until next time, thank you for coming on the Cheap Heat Productions podcast, sir.
Jack, great to talk with you again. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's it for this episode. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'm Jack Kilby. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for watching this video. Please give it a like if you enjoyed it. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Cheap Heat Productions. Don't forget to